Today we're going to make French macaron, green tea flavor, and we're going to start with our sugar syrup first. If you follow the directions in Sugar Baby, you'll get all the ratios, but today I'm going to show you physically how to do it. So right now I have sugar syrup going with a touch of lemon to stop it from crystallizing, and we all know what happens when it crystallizes, we're screwed. And then I have my handy thermometer. This is my favorite one. I'm not going to put it in yet until all the sugar has melted. I've got it on a low temperature so that it can slowly melt and it doesn't get to temperature too quickly before all the sugar melts. So while that's happening, I'm going to start my liquid egg whites foaming. I don't want them stiff yet. I just want them slightly foamy before I pour in the sugar mixture. In the meantime, I have the almond flour and the other ingredients, the confectioner sugar, my powdered egg whites, and I have about a tablespoon of matcha, which is green tea powder. And this is pretty much the perfect size. I got this online, I don't remember where, but it's a beautiful green color. Tablespoon is perfect. I've already mixed this up in the food processor to make sure that it's very fine, but I'm also going to put it through a sieve again because we want this perfect. I mean, there's so many things that can go screwy with making macaron. That's why I like to make every step as particular as possible just to make sure that it doesn't all go flat when it gets in the oven. I've got my oven preheated to 275 right now, 250, 275. Everybody's oven temperature I know is different, and it depends on if you have a convection oven or a conventional oven. It's something that you're going to have to experiment with, but you want it at the right temperature to make sure that you get the pied, the little feet on the bottom that mark the great macaron. So we're going to keep an eye out on our sugar. It's starting to bubble. See all those little buggers on the side? We want to get rid of those, because if they hop in, they're going to crystallize our sugar, and we want it to be completely clear. But it is melting beautifully. I never go too quickly, just in case it does crystallize. I want all the granules to be melted, but I also want to make sure that it's completely melted before I turn up the heat so it gets to the correct temperature for our sugar syrup that we're going to pour into the egg whites. That will be foamy, not stiff. Be gentle and be patient. That's all I ask of you. And if you screw up the first time, try it again, because I do. Goodness knows I screw up all the time. It's looking great. So now that I know that it's close to being completely melted, I'm going to go ahead and go to my mixer and start it on high just to get my egg whites foamy. Illegal maneuver. They don't allow you to do this in the instructions, but you'll notice that the whisk doesn't hit the bottom. So what I do is I turn it on, and it usually only works with the kind that clips in the back and has these little thingies. Check. Ooh, we're close. As I lift up the bowl as I'm mixing. We're there. Turn it down a little so the sugar doesn't splash in your face when it goes in. It also keeps the sugar from flying around the corners of the bowl, and it'll get stuck to the sides instead of going in. First I temper by just putting a little in, and then I'm pretty good about pouring it all in. Turn it up. In the meantime, I mix in the green tea powder. You'll see little clumps, and I usually just smush them down. It's not done yet. I usually feel the bottom of the bowl to make sure that it's not warm anymore. And that's an indication that it's got a little while to go. We're also going for something called bec d'oiseau, which means the beak of the bird, which is when the meringue, when it comes out, that it's not so stiff that it sticks straight up, that you've got a little bend to it. So like the beak of a bird doesn't go straight out, has a little bend to it. So that's what we're going for in our meringue. Bec d'oiseau, bird beak. Hey, hey, oh, hey. So it's got a little bit of give. The bird's beak. And we're going to add water to this per our recipe list, but I'm not adding the water until this is done, because if you add the water too quickly, the egg whites, the powdered egg whites that are already in this mixture, tend to harden too quickly. So we don't want it to harden before we add the egg whites. So just as they're ready, I'm adding our water. I usually put it around the edge. And then macarons are colorful, beautiful things, so they require a bit of dye. You can use spinach dye as well for the green, but usually if you really want it green, you have to put too much in there and it tastes like spinach macaron, which you may like. I'm not too crazy about it. So I usually add about 2 drops. 1, 2, and then I mix it up first before I add the egg whites. It'll become a paste. And it won't be completely integrated because there's not so much water that I can make a perfect paste, but I can get close and get it started. Right? Okay. The other trick is called lightening the batter. So if you add about 1/3 of the egg whites first and just kind of slop it in, that makes folding in the remaining amount of egg whites so much easier, and then you can maintain that beautiful fluffy nature of it. But for this first edition, you don't need to be too gentle. You can mix rather vigorously. I usually press against the side of the bowl because you'll have little clumps of the almond flour and the confectioner sugar in there otherwise. So now that we've created this paste, after we've included the egg whites, see beautiful green, all this. And then I add the remaining egg whites and I fold them in. What we're going for is a batter that flows easily but not too quickly. You don't want it flying out your hole too quickly. On the other hand, if it's too stiff, it'll maintain a peak when you bake it and it won't be completely smooth. So often the rule is that when you're at this point, when it's integrated, you smush a little against the side to get rid of some of the aeration so that you have a more viscous batter, but not so much that it's running. This looks about good. This is the tip I use. It's a pretty open, big open tip. And one of the tricks I do, since it will flow rather easily, is I try to bend the tip kind of against the side as I fill it so it doesn't flow out as I fill the bag. It takes a little coordination and it's never perfect, but I try. Stay. Piping. I prefer to make them a little larger than normal. In France, you can get them in the petite size, the 1 bite, or you can get them in the larger sizes, which I prefer because I like more stuff. And I'm also going to show you how to pipe in a heart shape. And that's incredibly easy and it's beautiful, perfect for Valentine's Day or any time. So first we'll do the traditional round. Gentle pressure. And a little flick of the wrist. The other trick of macaron is that you let them sit for about 20 minutes before you put them in the oven, so the top gets a lovely skin. And the other thing I do, I hold my tray, I put my thumbs on the parchment so that it doesn't wiggle around too much, and then I slam a gemma. I slam it 3 times. And it gets rid of any air bubbles in there, and it really smooths out the top. And then I let them sit on my rack for 20 minutes, because when you bite into a macaron, you want that slight little crunch, very slight, and the inside is nice and tender. So by keeping them out for 20 minutes to form that skin, they'll be perfect. And now we are going to pipe hearts. Very easy, exact same tip, right? Same tip, no worries. And what you'll do is you'll make a small dollop. You press a little and then you stop pressing and you drag. Small dollop, stop pressing, drag. Well, that's not perfect, is it? There we go. You want them relatively uniform because we're going to sandwich them and you want them to match. So you don't want them one all wonky and the other, you know, small, big. It's not easy, but you know, if you make enough of them, you'll start mixing and matching them and they'll be perfect. So squeeze, stop, squeeze, pull. Squeeze, stop, squeeze, pull. Nice. Wash my hands. Here's the other thing. Sometimes when I pull, I'll have too much of a tail. As I drool. Too much of a tail, or you see there's extra things. When you bake these, they'll get really hard and they'll snap off. So before I bake them, I usually clean it up a little, just so it stays nice and together once they're baked. There's no extra weirdness. So you may notice a few things. There's a missing heart, and you might ask why. It's because I ate it. That's what we get to do when you bake your stuff. You've got to make sure it tastes great, and does it taste great? Yes, it's phenomenal. And the other thing you might notice is that I lied to you. I'm not going to use mango, I'm going to use guava. Why? Because my mango was frozen and the guava wasn't. And you might ask yourself, or you might ask me, Gesine, is that any way to do flavor combinations? And I'd say to you, first of all, it's Gesine, not Gesine. And second of all, of course, use what you have on hand. Be adventuresome. Just make sure that the flavors complement each other. And I think guava and green tea are gorgeous together. So why not? So don't be afraid. You can use preserves instead of purees in your buttercream if you want to do that. I use green tea today. I've also used, on other occasions, pistachio flour instead of almond and cassis buttercream for another gorgeous flavor combination. If you don't want to use green tea, you can add espresso powder instead. And I'd love to fill the espresso macaron with salted caramel buttercream as well. Flavor combinations are endless. It's all to your imagination and depends on what you have in the refrigerator that's not frozen. So today we have the green tea, we have guava, and I'm using a star tip to pipe instead of an open tip. And an open tip would be the more traditional way of filling it, but I like the way that you see the shapes of the star tip on the side of the macaron because I fill it so that you can see it, and I think it's quite beautiful. So let's make sure that these are completely cool before we fill them, otherwise it will melt the buttercream and it will be too hard to get these off the parchment. Once they're completely cool, they come off beautifully, and the bottom you'll see it's just gorgeous. It's flat. Usually has a little bit of brown to it from the oven. Clearly it's been in the oven, but it'll be nice and flat and give you a perfect surface in which to pipe. Also, before I start piping, I take a look around. I'm only human. Some of them are smaller, some of them are bigger, and so I start kind of landscaping and decide which ones am I going to smush together so that you don't have a huge macaron on top of a little small one, and it looks very disconcerting to have a huge one on top of a little one. So we'll also look for ones that are a little uglier to place on the bottom. So like if it's got a little bubble, I use that. So this one has like a little bubble and I go, don't like that so much. So I pipe and then I find a matching one. I say this one looks good. Oh, this one looks good. And then I smush like that, try to make it even. And then I place it on my little, like that. The other thing that you want to make sure of when you are assembling is that when you take the macaron shells off of the parchment, there'll be little bits left behind sometimes that are sticky. So as you're assembling them, try not to put them back onto the parchment where there's little sticky bits. You want them to be perfect, so don't muss them up after you've already done such a beautiful job. And then we'll just continue filling. Smoosh.
Zwei uns an Küssen berauschen, halt dich still, den Worten zu lauschen. C'est si bon, oh das tut ja so gut, oh wie gut mir das tut.